I started dropping off friendships because I was so hungry, and it became everything that I was focused on. Nothing was more, absolutely nothing even came close to how important that was to me, to make sure that I was still losing weight. I didn't care how many friendships I lost, how much school I missed out on, it didn't matter. I had zero intention of stopping what I was doing. Hello, lovely. I hope you're doing really well. It's been a minute since I got my camera out and started filming. I have been incredibly busy with clients, so my apologies for that. I thought it was really important though for me to get my camera out today and start filming and actually redo a couple of videos which I already have out, my binge eating story and my recovery story. And I'm trying to put myself back into the shoes that I can imagine that you're in, where I was a few years ago, looking at videos such as this. And I can imagine that you need a few things from this video. One being empathy, to know that you most certainly are not alone. No matter how peculiar your relationship with food might seem, you are not alone. Two, I can imagine that you want to see if my story is even relatable to you. So if what I have to say is even going to be useful to you in any way. And three, most importantly, how did I stop binge eating? Because I really suffered in my relationship with food from the age of about 14 to 24. I had anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating pretty much every week, usually multiple times a week for those 10 years. Emotional eating, I thought about food 90% of the day. I honestly felt like I was a bit mad. To be honest with you, I felt totally food obsessed for a very, very long time. And I really didn't think that I would be able to just be like other people that I saw. I would look at envy at my sisters who just were healthy and fit, never thought about food, and I would question them on it deep, like, how are you able to do that? Like, what's your secret? Always looking for their, like, the diet that they follow, right? I look at my friends and just think, gosh, you're so lucky, you just never have to stress about food. And I really didn't think that was on the cards for me, but today I sit here with a totally normal and healthy relationship with food. And when I say normal, what I mean is that having a healthy relationship with food doesn't take any willpower for me, any discipline, no restrictions. It just comes naturally to me. And I find that when I use the term normal and healthy relationship with food, most of the time people can resonate with, I know what you mean by that. So I can totally empathize if you've come on here and you just want to know, okay, you were binge eating, Rach, and now you're recovered. How did you do that step by step? How did that go? Which I'm definitely going to share with you. The trouble with that is that doesn't mean anything and won't be at all helpful to you probably if you don't have an idea of how the eating disorder and binge eating developed in the first place, because binge eating doesn't come out of nowhere. It feels like that. It feels like something that's happening to us, right? That's not actually what's going on. And understanding how it developed in the first place it's absolutely critical. I always do this with my clients. We have to look at the story of how it developed if we want to heal our relationship with food, in my experience. So I'm going to start with that. So I had no issues with the food for up until like the age of 7. I don't remember ever thinking about it. I don't remember. Food in the house was just balanced, home cooked. It wasn't a thing. I didn't think about it. Perfectly healthy kid, just nothing to report. And then when I moved to France at the age of 7, that's when I start having memories of stealing food, of trying to sneak food, of begging my mum for extra desserts and getting really excited about the idea of having a yogurt. So at that time, I just thought, well, I mean, I wasn't really thinking anything about it, but at the time I just thought, well, I just like food. You know, who doesn't like chocolate, right, as a kid? And it turns out that actually something a little bit more complex was going on there when I started to look back in hindsight. And I was just really lonely. I was really lonely. It's not that my home life was terrible, nothing like that. I had no friends. I didn't speak the language. I was bullied a little bit for being foreign, and you know, I think those two things became interlinked. You know, I wasn't very happy, but food was there. When we came back from France, I was only there for about a year and a half. When I came back from France, actually, it did escalate because I started stealing food a lot, stealing food from my classmates, stealing money so that I could go and buy sweets. But again, I just thought that I liked food. I didn't think about it any more than that. Just thought that I liked sweets. And the thing that I get most excited about at sleepovers was being able to have all of the sweets. Anyway, so that continues and no change there until I hit about 11, going into secondary school. And I remember saying to my mum, if I still feel this way on my 12th birthday, Mum, I'm gonna go on a diet. And the reason I felt like that was because I desperately wanted to be popular. I remember that being the only thing that I really cared about, was getting into the group of like the cool girls, the pretty girls. And I remember at that age, some of the girls had started talking about their body, you know, either being skinny or too big, etc. And I honestly don't know what exactly happened, but long story short, I got the idea in my head, if I could be a bit skinnier, then I'd be in that group, which I so desperately wanted. I felt really like alone and not good enough, etc, etc. But sure enough, my 12th birthday came around and I was like, cool, I still want to be thinner. I still want to be skinnier. I remember thinking I want to see my ribs. And I started throwing my lunches away, which infuriated my mum when she found out, but it still didn't stop me doing it. So I'd have breakfast, throw my lunch away, thinking that I was being really clever and would just be able to lose weight. And all that ended up happening was that diet was not a success, as it were. I would just come home from school absolutely ravenous and raid the snack cupboard, not binging. I was just hungry, so I was eating and have toast and cereal, etc., and then have dinner and then get very excited about the idea of pudding. I just had it in my mind that I wanted to lose some weight, but it wasn't anything more extreme than that. And in any case, I couldn't seem to stick to this whole weight loss plan that I had created in my head anyway. So the next thing that I remember happening after that is I had got really into dance. I absolutely loved it, just because it was fun for no other reason other than that. And I remember that my brother said to me, or pointed out, that it looked like I lost some weight. And then the whole dancing thing kind of morphed into, stopped being fun and started being about, oh my gosh, well, I've lost a little bit of weight dancing, so I want to keep this going. It became more of a forced thing rather than something that I was doing because I actually really liked it. And I still desperately wanted to be like one of the popular girls, and I was still feeling this sense of inadequacy always. And I don't think that it helped. Absolutely no blame on my brother whatsoever. We were kids and kids just say things, right? But I don't think that it helped that my brother would tease me and call me fat. I remember my mum having a word with him one day and saying he probably shouldn't be doing that because she's starting to talk more and more about weight loss. But that's kids just being kids, right? But I do think that that probably didn't help the situation. So the next thing that I remember is I became very, very, very unhappy about the age of 14. My sense of self-esteem and just everything, how I felt at home, all of it, I just wasn't happy for one reason or another. It's not that my home life was terrible, nothing like that. I just remember feeling this deep sense of I want to run away. I'm just not happy. I don't like my life. I don't feel good. So my parents are divorced and I wanted to go and live with my dad. But I wasn't able to go and live with my dad, but what did happen is I ended up going to live with my grandma, and it felt like a fresh start. And everything was going to be good now, and I was going to be happy. And I started at a new school, this really almost hippie type school, I suppose is the best way of describing it. It was fab. Everyone was just really friendly, really lovely, and I arrived and it felt like a family, and I was like, you know what, this is going to be good. This is going to be really good. But the year was very small, so it was just our class in the year, and I very quickly noticed I'm the biggest in the class, and that really was a very upsetting thought for me. Then, whilst living at my grandma's, I started to put on some more weight because she had a lot of food in the house. Everything was fully stocked. I wasn't limited like I was at my mum's. At my mum's, it was 5 kids. You know, food isn't exactly, you know, it's limited to some degree. But at my grandma's, it wasn't. I could eat what I like, and I did. You know, emotionally eating, whatever you want to call it. I thought that I just liked food a bit too much, and so I would eat, and I gained a decent amount of weight, I suppose, noticeable, and that's when things really started to escalate. I felt incredibly insecure about the fact that I'd gained some more weight, and I was now even bigger than the other girls in the class, and that really, really mattered to me. And it was one moment in a physics class, distinctly remember, I'm sure we all have these moments that just like we remember as being a catalyst, where someone was teasing another boy about being the biggest in the class, which wasn't very kind. And I remember that he looked at me and said, well, implying I was the biggest in the class, and I was mortified. I was absolutely mortified. I don't remember the exact course of events, but very soon after that, I tried to make myself sick, and I unfortunately succeeded. And so what followed was me thinking I'd found the Holy Grail, the answer to my problems. I like food too much, so I'm going to keep eating and I can just get rid of it. So I told everyone that I was ill. So I just completely made up a lie to, so I started getting rid of the food. I started throwing the food up, and then that almost gave me a lot more motivation to be able to restrict my food. So it was super unhealthy motivation of like, oh my gosh, I'm losing weight, and it almost became easier for me to not eat. So what I told everyone was, I'm ill, I'm sick, so I can't really eat anything. And that was like the lie that I was falling under. I got taken to the doctors, and the doctors didn't pick up on anything, which I was glad for at the time, and now I really wish that they had. Anyway, so everyone thought that I was sick, and I went back to school and I'd lost a bunch of weight. And I remember my guy friend at the time saying, wow, illness really does have its benefits, huh? It's just like another nail in the coffin. So that was all the reassurance that I needed, that I was in fact doing the right thing. And so that continued, and it got worse, and I became more restrictive to the point that anything that I was eating, I would throw it up. I became very obsessive about the scale. If the scale went down, it was a good day. If the scale stayed the same, it was not a good day, and I had to try harder. And if the scale went up, it was catastrophe. And it makes me really sad to think about. I remember just falling into this position where, hold on, you get a lot of tears. I remember falling into this position where I was feeling so good about losing weight, so I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop what I was doing because it had its hooks in me by then, and it did make me feel really good seeing the scale go down. For reasons I'm not even sure I fully understood at the time. I thought that I just wanted to be skinny. I thought that it was just that simple. Seeing the scale go down was everything to me. It made me feel amazing. The types of confidence that I had not experienced in my life. And so it had to continue. There seemed to be no alternative. Becoming harder and harder essentially to lose weight. I had to be more and more restrictive. I couldn't go to school anymore. I started dropping off friendships because I was so hungry, and it became everything that I was focused on. Nothing was more, absolutely nothing even came close to how important that was to me, to make sure that I was still losing weight. I didn't care how many friendships I lost, how much school I missed out on, it didn't matter. And there was, and none of my family knew. So it wasn't picked up on for the longest time. It looked, because I'd started, as a bigger girl, I managed to lose quite a lot of weight and not even fall into the underweight category, if you see what I mean. So I think people obviously noticed that I was losing weight, but I was just saying that I don't feel well. And people bought it, my family bought it. I just said I don't feel very well. And then I think one day I just snapped, and I was so tired and so hungry and so scared, honestly, that I remember I confessed everything to my brother, and he cried and I cried, and then it all came out. Like, Rachel's got a problem. Not one I was willing to give up though. No. So there was this big rush to get me help. And when, you know, going down the traditional route of going to the doctor and getting therapy and all of that jazz, I had zero intention of stopping what I was doing. I didn't ask for the help. And actually now I was in an even more fortunate position where I was getting a shed load of attention for it. And I loved that. I craved that from my family. Just the whole focus was on me, and it felt absolutely amazing. To the point, I'm not proud to admit this, that I liked the fact that they worried. I liked it, that they were scared for my health. And that kept it alive. It was a big thing that kept my eating disorder alive at this point, was their worry, as horrible as that is to admit. And I remember there was this moment, I ate loads of cereal because I was really, really hungry, because I would never eat anything. I ate loads of cereal and I tried to get rid of it, and I couldn't. And the next day I woke up and I was 2 pounds heavier on the scale. And I would call it a breakdown. I don't know if there's another moment in my life that has been that low, because I gained 2 pounds, and it seemed to take everything from me, and I just totally collapsed. And I remember my dad came over and my brother came over, and I was just absolutely beside myself with grief, which not a lot of people can understand, but maybe you can empathize with that. Things escalated in terms of the help that I was receiving. Again, I didn't want help. I just wanted to be thinner. Every goalpost that I had, you know, this was my weight goal, I would move past it and think, no, this is my new weight goal, and it was always going to be lower, always. And so the help that I got was taken up a notch, and basically they forced me to eat. I wasn't taken in as an inpatient or anything like that, but I was forced to eat. I had to sit at the table and eat portioned food. I had a certain amount of calories that I was being forced to eat, and I had to sit at the table, and I wasn't allowed to leave for 45 minutes afterwards so that I couldn't throw up my food. And it was, and I tried to play all the tricks in the book. The first time that we came home from that appointment and they said, this is the way it's going to be, I was thinking, ha ha ha, you're not going to get me. And so my dad made me food. And while his back was turned, I was taking food and putting it in my pockets. And then my dad came over to me at the end of the meal and he said, I'd like you to empty your pockets, please, Rachel. And I was like, and they had warned him of all this sneaky stuff that I would try. And I tried so much sneaky stuff to avoid eating. And to be honest, I got away with a lot of it. Some of it I didn't, some of it I was called out on, and a lot of it I got away with, which I won't go into. If you have experience with it, then you already know, and if you don't, there's no reason for me to discuss the things that I did, but I was trying to avoid eating. And then something happened, moment happened, and it was like I lost all the control that I'd had before. Long story short, I started gaining weight. Up and up and up and up, despite my best efforts. I really, really tried every day to get back the same level of control that I had before, but I just couldn't. So I was pretty rapidly gaining weight, to be honest, and that was just really, to say that was really difficult, I think it's a massive understatement. So I couldn't show my face at school. So at 16, I left home entirely. My grandma's left my parents and I went to go and work in London as a nanny. And I just kept gaining weight and trying to offset it, trying to diet, but just couldn't. Really just horrible. That feeling was just absolutely horrible. I had nothing else. I had no friendships anymore. I wasn't at school anymore, no hobbies, distanced myself from family. And in my mind, it sounds so sad to say, but in my mind, I was like, I'm just going to go off and work on my own, and I'm going to get a handle on my food, and I'm going to show back up totally thin, and everyone's going to be super impressed, and then I can get on with my life. And that is so not what happened. I kept gaining weight to the heaviest that I'd ever been. Significantly heavier than I was before I'd even started trying to diet or restrict in the first place, which was immensely devastating. And I stayed there for a long while until I eventually managed to get a handle on my food for a little while and lost some more weight. And as the years went by, I was sometimes losing weight and sometimes gaining weight, and all the while binge eating. All the time. I had a constant urge to binge eat. I thought about food the vast majority of my day. I thought about my weight equally as much. Every single morning I would come to the scale, and whatever that number said was my mood for the day, what I got to wear that day, how I got to feel that day, what I got to eat that day, whether I was allowed to go out and socialize. It was everything to me. Everything. And I would not go out and socialize most of the time because I was embarrassed about the way that I looked, or I was afraid that I was going to binge eat. I was afraid of the food. I couldn't control my food for one reason or another. I wouldn't socialize. I didn't really care all that much about, I was at school, I was studying, and I did care about that. But if it was a choice in a day of, hey, you could just eat less today or you could study, then this one would always win. I didn't really have any hobbies. I was getting into the gym because I wanted to look a certain way, but I didn't really have any hobbies because all I cared about was my weight and my food. And again, it was just this, once I've got a handle on this, then I can live my life, was just the theme of it. Once I'm thin and confident, then I can live my life. So by this point, I had tried every single diet, eating plan under the sun, and none of it worked whatsoever because I wanted to binge eat, because I was obsessed with food, because my cravings were just so out of control. It was unbelievable. And it took me a few years like this before I started to get genuinely concerned of, oh my gosh, is this my lot in life? Now that I have to live my life like this, constantly battling this urge and food obsession all the time. And it didn't seem like anybody understood. I had a couple of long-term boyfriends, and they would, give the advice of, why don't you just, if you want to lose some weight, why don't you just eat a little bit less and move a little bit more? Or, well, if you've got a craving, why don't you just call a friend or have a bath? But after enough experience of going around the same cycles all the time, it slowly started to dawn on me that this was going to be my situation for the rest of my life. So either I could be weighing less, but would be totally food obsessed and battling urges, or I was going to be weighing more and it was going to be the same situation. I slowly started to realize, oh my gosh, I don't think there's going to be a way for me to just feel normal around food. And I hadn't really thought about it until then because my primary focus had been weight loss. But then after enough years, I started to think, well, hang on a second, this is more important than just weight loss. Is this literally my relationship with food? Is this what I have to deal with every single day for the rest of my life, regardless of what my weight does? And there was sort of this shift that happened, that if you had asked me, would you rather have your perfect body, what that means to you, Rach, or just be normal with food, like you see other people being, never have to worry about it again, but maybe you weigh more than you previously wanted to, which one would you choose? And up until a certain point in my life, I would have chosen the perfect body. And then there was a switch that started happening where I thought, my gosh, no, please please let me just have a normal and healthy relationship with food. But I didn't know that was an option for me at the time. I hadn't heard about it, I hadn't really considered it. I very much saw myself as someone that likes food too much. I'm a binge eater, you know, this is an affliction that I'm gonna have to battle with for the rest of my life. But just if you'd given me the choice at that time, that's what I would have started to choose. And here's one part that really kept me stuck for a while. I had tried eating a normal amount of food. I had tried eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, 3 meals a day. I had tried going onto the calorie counters and asking, you know, what's an appropriate amount of food and eating that. So I had tried that. It wasn't like I was always in my mind restricting food. When I say that I tried everything, I really had. And still, I would end up binge eating uncontrollably. Still, I had the food obsession. And my weight, meanwhile, was just going up and up and up and up and up. And I distinctly remember I was trying to eat enough, like plenty, of only whole foods. I'd made the most boring, deliberately boring food that I could possibly think of to be like, so I can fill up my hunger without wanting to eat more than I needed. I'm talking oats with water and nothing else. I'm talking about plain chickpeas and nothing else. And I remember sitting there with my like rice and greens and chickpeas, no flavoring on whatsoever, this big container of it, trying to eat an adequate amount of calories on this really boring food so that I wouldn't want to eat anymore. And I remember thinking like, this is it, this is my last shot, this has got to be the answer, right? Eating enough but make it really boring. I remember I was eating this and then I was on my way to my mum's, so I finished my food, or I had some left. I got on the train, I went to my mum's, I arrived at my mum's and then I started to binge. I went to the cupboard, ate something, I was like, oh my gosh, and I just zoned out and I just started eating. And that was my rock bottom. And when you guys hear me talk about my rock bottom, my turning point, whatever you want to call it, that was it. That was I literally don't have anything left to try. I have tried everything. So I thought. And thankfully, the universe answered, if you believe in that, with something which then completely changed my track in life and started to propel me to where I am today, which I'm so grateful happened. My mum, when I saw her, she has always been a thin lady. She's just a slim lady. That's just her natural body type. Always been a really good eater, good appetite. I was very envious of that. And when I saw her when I arrived, she was even smaller. And I was like, Mum, how have you managed to do that? I asked, and she said, well, I haven't done it intentionally. I've not been trying to lose weight intentionally. I've just adopted a plant-based vegan diet. And it's just sort of, I've been eating loads, I've been eating absolute amounts of food, and the weight's just sort of dropped off unintentionally. And I was like, loads of food, you say? Not boring food, just a vegan plant-based diet, but certainly not boring. I was like, interesting. Okay, bit skeptical, but you know, my mum has lost weight and she is eating a lot of food, so I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. Long story short, I come across the world of plant-based veganism, and through one lady that I saw on YouTube, there was a light bulb moment where she was talking about her binge eating recovery story, and she said that when you've been dieting for so long, it's normal to feel ravenously hungry. It's just normal. It's something called extreme hunger, is what she was saying, and it's totally normal. And actually, if you just eat, guys have probably come across the all-in method, right? She was talking about that. Eat as much as you want, and basically your appetite will come down and your relationship with food will take care of itself. On a plant-based vegan diet, this lady was advocating for. Kind of understanding the premise, long story short, I tried it. That's exactly what I did. I went full raw vegan, but I can eat as much as I possibly want, because I was not I was so not ready to let go of all the food rules that I have, and no one had suggested that to me. So I was like, okay, I'll eat as much as I'm hungry for to try and balance my hunger. But I'm not entirely sure that's the thing. I don't fully believe that. So I'm going to eat only raw vegan food. So it's super restrictive still. But eating as much as I wanted, actually, it did start to balance my hunger, and the relief was, oh my gosh. And I was at still the heaviest, near the heaviest that I'd ever been, but I was thinking, wow, like this is amazing. I'm on the right track here. And so in my mind, because this way of eating had been so much of a help to me, I was very, very set that this was the right way for me to be eating. So as much as I wanted, but a whole foods plant-based diet. And I remember the binge eating going away. I was eating a lot, but I had permission to eat. And I remember feeling the most free that I ever had in my adult life around food, despite it still obviously being restrictive. I felt the most free. I could eat as much as I want. My appetite started to balance out. And the binge eating sort of went away, and my weight stabilized, and I was thinking, hallelujah. And it's really hard to recall the exact sequence of events now because it was quite a while ago, but I remember being good for a while, but still wanting to be smaller than I was. I was weight stable, I was happy about that. I did feel fit, I felt good, but I wanted to be smaller still. And at one point or another, that got the better of me, and I started being more restrictive again, and the binge eating returned. And I was like, oh look, binge eating literally is just because, you know, it's just a result of extreme hunger. I thought that was the extent of it at the time. And I was like, okay, don't restrict, go back to plant-based diet, whole foods, and you know, that'll be good enough. But the trouble was it wasn't really fully working. So the initial high of being able to eat as much as I wanted eventually wore off, and while I was still grateful for that, not being as food obsessed as I was, I found that I still, you know, I couldn't socialize properly, or I found it difficult to go out and eat. I found that I still felt like I couldn't be trusted around certain foods, and what I hadn't realized had happened at the time is I had developed orthorexia, so very, very strict. Rather than being how much weight can I possibly lose, my diet has to be 100% perfect. And I was training as a nutritionist at the time, and which is, you know, wonderful to know about nutrition. I love that I know so much about nutrition, that I am a nutritional therapist. But at the time, that combination of orthorexia and nutritional training just wasn't a good mix for me. Because I felt like all foods, like any foods at any time, could just completely deteriorate my health. But anyway, so my diet was still restrictive and my body image still wasn't good. And because my body image wasn't good, I didn't feel very good about myself, confident in who I am. And my life was still not being lived to the fullest, shall we say, because I was insecure. I was insecure about myself as a person, about the way that I looked, how big I was, etc., etc. And while I didn't realize it at the time, I just thought that I liked eating, you know, I'm Rachael and I like eating. I was still eating a lot more than, say, I do now, because of, call it emotional eating if you like, but I didn't realize that was going on. But as I look back now, I can see that that was happening. So food and weight still governed my life to some degree, just less intensely as it had before. And this went on for a while, just like this. It just went on for a while. I very much advocated for a whole foods plant-based diet. I advocated it if you want to get over binge eating. Totally. And while I have absolutely there's nothing bad that I could say about a plant-based diet whatsoever, or being vegan. But for me, it was not coming from a good place. It was not coming from a place of love or care for me, for animals, for planet. None of it. It was purely coming from a place of wanting to control my weight and have a sense of control around my food as well. And I don't remember what the next big shift was. So there came a point where I suddenly just decided I'm going to bring all foods back into my diet. I can't remember what the catalyst was for that, but maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe I was just so fed up and feeling restricted, or maybe it's because it suddenly dawned on me of, hey, I don't actually have, you know, like a healthy relationship with food if I get anxious about the idea of eating a bit of chocolate, you know. Long story short, I brought all foods back in, namely I'm thinking about the, the chocolate and the cookies and the crisps and stuff. And I was under the impression that I would just want to eat a lot of these foods for a little while because they were novel, and then it would die down and then I'd be able to eat all foods. So I must have heard that somewhere or got that in my head. But anyway, that's what I did. And that in fact did happen. So all foods came in. I was a bit like excited, like, oh my gosh, I can eat ice cream again. And then actually it just sort of all died down, and I just was then eating all foods, but without wanting to binge eat. And I just found a really nice balance, and I felt really, really good. I felt really, really good about it. Nothing happened with my weight or anything. Yes, I still wanted to be thinner, but I was really happy about the fact that all foods are now back in my diet and everything was cool. It wasn't the food that had been triggering me for all that time. It's just because I've been deprived of it or I was going hungry, was the conclusion that I started to come to. And to be honest, the story could have stopped there, but it didn't. After making all these wonderful breakthroughs and with my training already as a nutritional therapist, I decided that helping other women with binge eating is what I want to do. I was like, I've arrived. I've got a great relationship with food, I've gone all the way, I thought at the time, and now I really want to help other women do the same. So I started training as a master practitioner of eating disorders so that I could do that and I could coach women. And I found out some fascinating things on that training, some fascinating things about emotional eating, about cravings, about body image, about self-worth. It was fascinating, and it really opened my eyes to, I still have some ways to go. And I had not considered that I was an emotional eater until this point. I just thought I like food too much, or I just like food. I'm a foodie and I will always be this way. And as I dug deeper, I discovered all the ways I have been using food emotionally, and it was fascinating. I always thought I'm not an emotional eater because the pitch that I had in my mind is, I'm sad, so I'm going to go to the shops and buy ice cream and eat it, knowing that I'm sad and that's going to cheer me up. Turns out, rarely the case of how emotional eating shows up. I discovered that as a person, I never get angry, and that it had been advised to me throughout childhood to not feel angry. And so I would never get angry, I'd never stand up for myself, which wasn't very then good on my self-esteem, which meant that I then wanted to restrict myself and take it out on my body, which then impacted my relationship with food. I discovered that when I get angry, I would get maybe hungry and have cravings. Fascinating. I discovered that as I started to live my life more and more and have loads of fun, I found that I was less and less interested in food. So food had been a big source of fun for me, and it could go on. Absolutely fascinating to learn, to bring my awareness to. And I suppose the last kicker was, and so, through that brought all of my emotional eating down, and some emotional eating is perfectly normal. I certainly eat food still because just for no other reason than it tastes good or I want to join in. But I was doing quite a lot of emotional eating, and around my PMS time was particularly prevalent for that as well back then. I just didn't have an awful lot of ways to care for myself or to feel fulfilled, and I could go on, but you get the idea. So all of that was addressed bit by bit, and through doing that, it's what I often say to clients as well. When you do work on emotional eating, you change as a person. When you work on your relationship with food, you change as a person because you have to in order for your relationship with food to get better and to move past emotional eating. Trying to deal with emotional eating or binge eating by just trying to use willpower to stop is about as useless as, I don't know, I was trying to come up with a funny analogy there, but bottom line, it's really useless. It's not about a lack of willpower or a lack of discipline. I can assure you of that. Yes, and then the last kicker was body image. And my body image had dramatically improved. The less that I was so obsessive about food, that just naturally made my body image just much better. And as my confidence started to grow and I started to do the work on myself and my life started to build and started to work on my self-esteem, etc., that massively helped with my body image. But certainly the last thing for me so far, because there might be more yet that I have to uncover and work on, I'm sure that there is, but the last thing in this story was really letting go of identifying so much of myself with my body. I just didn't want to have anything in my life dictated anymore about my body. I'd come so far in myself and my confidence, and still I had little, well, you can't wear that because your body doesn't look perfect. And I had this whole thing about, while I accepted my body and loved it and, certainly wasn't putting myself down, I still had this thing of, I feel uncomfortable doing certain things if I don't look perfect. I never wanted anything in my life, put it this way, to be dictated by what my body looks like. I just thought that was so unnecessary and unimportant, and how nice it would be to be totally freed from that. So that was the last part, I think. Yeah. And so after 10 years of food obsession, binge eating, trying everything, nowhere else to turn, it seemed. I eat freely, I like food, I don't really think about it unless I'm hungry in the healthiest way possible. I go out to eat, I don't track calories, I don't count macros, I couldn't care less. My body is in balance, I'm fit, healthy because I want to, because I enjoy it, not because I have to by any means. I'm equally happy to sit on the sofa and eat popcorn and watch a movie. My appetite cues are in balance. I have no desire to eat past the point of satiety. Why would I, when I can eat again in 10 minutes if I want to? I eat all foods. I love chocolate. I'm a big chocolate girl, but I also love all nutritious food. I just love all foods in general. My life is full. Through much effort and building, my life is full. My confidence is good. That sense of feeling lonely and inadequate is no longer present. I like myself. I respect myself. I respect my body. My body doesn't dictate anything that I want to wear or do. So all in all, we made it to the other side. Maybe there's more to go, I don't know. And I just fundamentally, while this is my story, I work with so many women day in and day out, and they have improved their body image and relationship with food and stopped binge eating just the same. Just the same. I'm not lucky. I did not find a magic diet. I certainly did not become more disciplined, and neither do the women that I work with. We just need the full, we need all the pieces of the puzzle, right? You can go to therapy and talk about your feelings, and if you're ravenously hungry, it will only help so much, because you're just hungry and find it hard to feel satisfied. If you've got a craving, having other coping mechanisms is great, but trying to force yourself not to emotionally eat and call a friend instead is just not going to work. At least in my experience, we need the full picture of the puzzle, but make no mistake that if you have all of the pieces of the puzzle and you're working with someone or you're looking into getting the right insights, there's no reason why you can't have a completely normal and healthy relationship with food. There's nothing that I believe more strongly than that, and I see it week in and week out. So take that with you. And of course, if you resonate with my philosophy in particular and my story and my approach, and you like the way that I work with women, or you want to find out more, you're maybe interested in being coached by myself, then in the description, you're very welcome to put your name down on my waitlist. I am currently fully booked, but put your name down on my waitlist, and when spaces open up, then you'll be one of the first to hear and book in a call. All right. But lots of love to you. Any questions whatsoever, because I will have missed things out, then just put them down in the comments, and I will respond to as many as I possibly can. All right, lovely. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.